the interesting talk. So I'm Florian Myter. I'm a business developer at the Software Languages Lab. As was the case for the previous presenters, I start with a lighthearted poll. So the question is, the next AI winter, when is it going to happen? Answer one, it's bound to happen. We've been over-promising the virtues and the capabilities of AI too much. It's not going to happen at all. It's endless AI summer from here on out, or it already has started. And so, just to be clear, of course, AI winter is generally seen as a decrease in interest and funding on the side of AI, and then AI summer is the opposite, namely what we've seen in the last couple of years: people being very interested in AI, lots of research and innovation in AI, and adoption by industry, and of course the reason why we're here, by governments in general. So I'm seeing some of the answers coming in. A lot of people going for the endless summer answer. So I guess that's very promising if you're in the field of AI. But it's a tie up until now. So I'll leave a couple more seconds for everyone to fill in their answers. All right, so apparently half of you think that it's going to be a endless AI summer from here on out. I guess we'll see in the years to come. So first of all, a quick background on who I am and where I come from. So we're not the AI lab from the VUB, which you might have expected. So we're the Software Languages Lab. We're a mid-sized lab at the VUB, so 8 professors, 10 doctors, which of course publish a number of publications and doctoral dissertations per year, and we're about 25 pre-doctoral students. In a very broad sense, our mission is to make the development of applications for extreme machines easier, more scalable, less error-prone. And when I say easier, or when I say extreme machines, I mean going from the very tiny, think IoT and embedded devices, to the very large cluster in cloud computing. And the way, of course, that we tackle that mission, as the name suggests, is by developing new programming languages, but also new programming libraries, or even tools such as IDEs, debuggers, that sort of thing. At this point, some of you might wonder, so you're not in AI. Why have you been given a seat at an AI talk? So I'm not in AI, or we're not in AI in a traditional sense. And what I mean by traditional sense is that most AI stories are sort of divided into 3 phases. You start out with a data set, which you're going to clean, or you're going to generate some simulated data, use that data to train a neural network or to provide some model, to feed some model, and then you'll use that neural network or that model to integrate in an overarching software system to do some system verification, possibly having a back pointer if you need to start retraining once new production data flows in. And then my question always is, what if the data set isn't there? What if it's not available, right? So our take on it is that there's actually a step 0, which is capturing the data that you need and validating that that data is more or less what you would expect it to be based on human insights. And so, of course, you might think, well, data capture is that really an issue? We generate about, I think the numbers are 2.7 million terabytes of data per day. A lot of it coming from smartphones and sensors. Is that really a problem? And of course, all of that data is generated, but you still need the systems to collect that data. And more importantly, if you go towards using that data for data-driven policy or for AI in government technology, it's extremely important to make sure that that data is representative of your population, that it's free of biases as much as possible. And I like to quote somebody that's more knowledgeable than I am on that level, which is Alain Mullaert, the CEO of Citizen Lab, which is a Brussels-based GovTech startup, which is really booming in the last couple of months, and I think especially with COVID. And she wrote this very interesting column in, I think it was last week or the week before, in Trends, talking about data-driven decision-making for government. And her take on it is that you should involve as much as possible citizens and stakeholders in you collecting the data, exploring, understanding that data. And that ideally, and this is something that comes back also partially out of Michel's talk, you would like to start small scale and lean and agile, right? If from the get-go, day one, you start with big AI and ML projects, that's not really the way to go. You want to start small scale, small data collection campaigns, human insight, before you start scaling up to automating that insight using artificial intelligence. And once you start with that small scale lean approach, you end up in what we like to call the sort of data dichotomy. So let's say you have an idea for a new GovTech application, you want to use AI, you need data, that data set is not there, or you want to collect additional data. So what do? Well, you start out on the left. You take a cross-functional team of diverse people, you put them in front of a whiteboard, you give them stacks of Post-its, and they start drawing boxes and arrows, writing stuff on Post-its. At the end of the day, you have an idea of what data you want to collect, what you want to get out of the insights more or less, and what the application should do. And then, of course, comes the crucial step of translating that beautiful idea you have, which everybody understands in your organization or in government, and translating it to something which almost nobody understands, which is source code, of course. And that's the start of our research track, and the reason I'm here, of course. Our idea is data for citizens by citizens. So the big goal of our research track called Weavely, which is also the name of our software platform, is to enable anyone, so people without programming backgrounds, to build their own data collection systems, allowing them to see in real time what the data is that they're collecting, provide already some human insights on that data, write basic applications before you continue with heavy AI tracks to sort of optimize the gathering of insights. So it's a research track which originally started with the PhD thesis of a colleague of mine, Jesse Zaman, funded by Innoviris, and which was later translated into a larger research project on citizen science by the Agentschap Innoveren en Ondernemen, which is now called Vrije. And the general metaphor before I start explaining how it works is that you basically, as a citizen without programming skills, you should be given the software Lego blocks to build your data collection system. So everybody has the cognitive capacity to sort of dream up a system or an application. The only thing you need to do as a programmer is glue all of this together. And our idea was to sort of automate this in a Lego fashion. So to give you an idea of how that looks like, a concrete case, which is about noise pollution. So this is an article from The Guardian, which states the effects of noise pollution on health. And then there's obviously some low-hanging fruit there, such as hearing losses and hearing damage. But it also leads apparently to behavioral problems in children, and can even lead to coronary diseases in citizens due to high cortisol levels, etc. I suggest you read the article if you want to know the exactitudes. But so as a government, let's say that you want to measure noise pollution in your city, and you want to use that eventually to start predicting noise levels in specific neighborhoods to try and tackle the issue. And so, as I said, you start out on the left with your cross-functional team. And I, of course, played the cross-functional team on my own in my office here. But I think everybody will agree on the steps that your application needs to go through. You want to combine smartphone location with microphone readings from your citizens. You want to aggregate that data on a centralized server in order to render heat maps. And of course, this would allow you in an initial step to be lean and to notice right away that you're missing data from a specific neighborhood, or that the majority of contributions come from males or females, that kind of stuff. That's the left side. That's what you want to implement, basically. On the right side is how that translates for an engineer, and I'm a programmer, so this is what I think immediately when I hear that kind of stuff. It's, of course, well, you need to open up sockets from your user's smartphone to the server to stream data. They might run into tunnels, so you'll get disconnections. Who says disconnections says data inconsistencies on the server, so you need to handle that as well. I think you're starting to catch my drift. All the things on the right are non-essential to your application domain and to the problem at hand. They just come from the tools that programmers use, namely these programming languages. As a citizen and as a government, what you want to do is focused on the left part, collecting the data and gathering insights. And so this is what our platform allows you to do, and this is what it looks like. So basically, you have a whiteboard, which allows you to drag and drop components onto a canvas. And these components, they represent some atomic logic. For example, get the access the microphone and get the sound pressure level, or accessing the user's location, that kind of stuff. Each component is tagged here, you can see, with a specific color, and that color indicates where the component is going to be deployed. Is it on the edge, so embedded devices, smartphone sensors? Is it on the server, or is it in the real-time dashboard? And by linking these components together, you specify the flow of data across your system. So from edge devices, smartphones, for example, to server, to the dashboard. And you get a real-time overview. Our system provides a real-time overview of the application that you're building while you're building it. And this, of course, allows you as a citizen to really play around with the data that you're collecting, but also with the system that you're building, figuring out issues, seeing what the data is going to look like when you deploy it in production eventually. And so we like to call our platform a whiteboard on steroids. The reason being that basically it's almost a one-to-one translation step of what you would do with your post-its on a real whiteboard, except that our platform automatically generates code. So given a graph of components, we're going to generate the necessary mobile apps and embedded software code, so Android and iOS. Part of the graph is going to be automatically deployed on-premise or on our cloud servers, and part of that is going to be deployed on the BV dashboard. So all of this without citizens having to worry about deployment, opening sockets, running servers, all of that kind of stuff. You focus on the essential complexity and let the platform handle all the nasty side effects. So is it more than just an academic promise which you can't deliver? And so far, we've been able to show through various experiments that we are able to enable citizen developers, as they're called, so people without programming skills, to build useful systems. So we've done a variety of different experiments. And in this case, it was an experiment in, I think it was Abu Dhabi, at a university, college, and it was Students in Mobility, I believe, which implemented a version of the application I just showed, so the noise measurement pollution system. And given a workshop of about an hour on the workings of our platform, of course, they were able to build a complete system, go out in a city, measure data, come back and analyze and visualize that data. Which, to remind you, of course, is sort of the first step before you go towards automating that using neural networks or other AI ML techniques. So in that case, data was a means to an end, but sometimes data is the actual end. And I think it's important to show a non-AI use case at an AI talk, because we sometimes too quickly jump to the AI conclusion. We see a problem, it's data-driven, and by default, we think, okay, let's solve the problem with AI. And that's not always the case. And this sort of harks back to my points and Michelle's points and Aline's point that you want to start small scale, lean, and build out from there. And so the use case starts with Philip Merks, which is shown on the left here. He's the head of the restaurants at the VUB. So there's two staff/student restaurants on our campuses, one in Jette and one in Etterbeek, with a capacity of around 1,500 people. Over the summer, government decides that restaurants need to keep contact information, which of course is necessary but cumbersome. But if you have 1,500 people coming over for lunch every day, it's more than cumbersome, right? You generate huge waiting queues outside because everybody needs to write down their contact information. And so what we did is that we used Weavy again to build a small-scale prototype at first for Philip. The idea being that we generate QR codes automatically. People that come into the restaurant scan those QR codes, they provide their contact information. We are able to store that data securely on our servers. And we generate one, real-time dashboards of the occupancy of the restaurants at the view B, which is handy if you want to go to the restaurant knowing is it full or not. And two, we also automatically generate close contact lists. So given a specific person, we are able to generate a list of people that might have been in close contact with that person at a given point in time in the view B restaurants. And so the lean or the agile part in this is that a couple of weeks later, the system is being used across campus. So I think we're at about 170 services that use our system. And the important thing here is that there's many different versions which services can tweak themselves. So we have ranging from different questionnaires. So in the restaurant, they ask you for your first name, last name, email address, or phone number. But in certain labs, you want to know whether it's a student or a laborant, even ranging to integration with CO2 sensors. So having meeting rooms where people scan in and scan out for the sake of contact information tracing, but where we also integrate with CO2 sensors in the meeting room, which are going to push out notifications to the people in that room whenever the thresholds are above a certain limit and that you want to open up a window to sort of let some air in. All of this being citizen available and citizen enabled. So empowering people to do this themselves rather than relying on a few developers to do this behind the scenes in an opaque way. And this sort of ties in with the general trends that we're seeing. The numbers here that I'm showing come from Gartner. So, I mean, I think most of you will probably know Gartner. So they usually write at this predicting trends, but you should take the exact numbers with a grain of salt. But so they do predict that by 2024, 3/4 of large enterprises will use 4 of these so-called low-code or no-code platforms that I've just showed to develop internal systems. And that 65% of application development activity will come from this low-code, no-code space. And so this, of course, it's Gartner, so these are numbers for enterprise, but there was a very interesting article in Wired magazine last week, which relates the sort of equity or the equitableness of our future with empowering citizen developers. I think that in the context of GovTech and AI, it's extremely important to provide citizens with the means to collect their own data, to get their own insights, to have a say in what data is going to be used to feed a specific neural network or machine learning algorithm used by the government to drive policy. And those are sort of the key takeaways of my talk here. So that the first takeaway being that data collection is a very important step in your AI value pipeline. So of course you need to clean it and train and predict, but collecting the right data, and especially if there's not a data set available, is an important part. The second one ties in. If it's AI for GovTech, then I think citizens should have a say in what data is going to be used, how that data looks like before you actually start pushing it into production and driving decisions based on it. And of course, the last one is that if you want to provide the tools to the citizens, they need to be citizen enabled. Most citizens aren't programmers. And so you need to have tools which are understandable, but usable and automated for citizens. And I think that, of course, Weebly being a prime example because it's ours, but there's a lot of no-code, low-code tools out there which empower citizens to do so. And with this, it's my pleasure to give the word back to Rosanna, which is going to lead the Q&A.
Thank you. That was a really interesting presentation. I think really 3 very interesting, insightful presentations, and also quite interesting because of the different origins, let's say, of the speakers. So the governmental view, the more the private sector view, and then more the research view. So that was really insightful. Thank you to everyone. And also we have received quite a lot of questions in the question and answer tool. So thank you for everyone for submitting your questions. And we will, if we will not reply now, we will definitely get back to you with an answer by the end of tomorrow. And I would like to specifically, as we have 15 minutes left, and I would like to ask every speaker once in a row. I would like to come a bit more back to this notion that also Michelle talked about, the vision, right? The vision that we need is a bit broader than a technology. It's not just the technology itself, but it is really the way that we would like to go when we speak about implementation of AI in governments. And this obviously also ties into education measures and lifelong learning measures. So how can we make sure that not a few, but the broad majority, let's say, of the society is really aware of and can deal well with the digital transformation overall. So my general question to all of you, and I will ask the speakers in the order in which they appeared, is really, given the controversy of like who's in charge also with regard to implementing AI, who should also be in charge of dealing and offering educational measures to really ensure that the society overall is well briefed. So how can we ensure actually that the next generation is well prepared for the integrated approach with AI? So where should digital literacy education take place, and who should also be in charge of the financing? So Nathanael, if I may, what is your opinion on this? How can we maximize the societal responsibility in technology?
Thank you, Rosanna, for this very, very important question. As you know, the first acts of the AI for Belgium strategy is to set up a new learning deal. That means that we will have a need for approximately 60,000 to 70,000 people in IT. 60% of them must have competencies in AI by 2023. But it's not only the technical competencies that must be improved, as we can see on, for example, the World Economic Forum. The competencies that are expected are much more wider than the technical expertise and competencies. So it's related to creativity, to collective intelligence, to leadership, to empathy. So all these are really, really important. Regarding the citizen, we have launched with the support of the KU Leuven and UC Louvain, the Elements of AI course that is addressed to all citizens without a technical background to understand what AI is and to understand how it does function, what it can do and what it cannot do, so that they can actively participate to the debate. For this debate and for the ethical aspect, we have organized a broad consultation on the white paper, for example, on the ethics guideline of the high-level expert group of the European Commission. And every citizen can also directly participate to the AI EU Alliance to put their advice or their comments on what's happening at the European level. Who has to develop the AI solution? I think I stressed it in the ethics by design slide I presented. So when we develop, when we design, when we implement, and through the whole life of an AI system, we must have multidisciplinary teams, so not only technicals and programmers, but also sociologists, philosophers, people that are specialized in human science, so that we can have a multiple view on the development of this solution and assess the ethics guidelines and impact of the solution.
Yeah, thank you. I think you brought it already across in your presentation. I just asked quick follow-up questions, as you already mentioned the Elements for AI course, which is, I think, a very interesting initiative originally developed in Finland. This is probably organized by by your initiative, let's say. Do you think that the funding models should be reconsidered at one point, so that it's not only the government or, let's say, the Ministry of Education that is in charge for financing these education measures, but also maybe public-private partnerships or even private entity itself?
So I think we need different types of trainings. We should integrate digital skills in the obligatory education, and then we should enhance and improve the development of specific training for lifelong learning and address to the companies. So yes, we could have public-private partnerships for specific training dedicated to the CEOs or CXOs of the companies, so that they understand well how they can integrate AI in their strategy. For the moment, the uptake of AI by the companies is quite too low. It's about 10% in Belgium, and it must be improved.
Okay, thank you. That's very, very interesting. Yeah. Florian, what do you think? Who should be in charge of preparing the next generation for technology, and who should finance this?
So I think the obvious answer, and I think that Nathaniel raised that point as well, should be that the government should rethink the way that we teach computer science or informatics courses to young children. And the reason that I absolutely agree with this is because I've been a Coder Dojo coach. I stopped now, but I've been so in the past couple of years to sort of fill that gap that the government is leaving. Informatics is not Word and Excel. It's part of it. But I think that computational thinking is an essential part of understanding the world around us. And that doesn't go through programming or through specific pieces of technology, but it goes to understanding what an algorithm is, what different algorithms do, how they work, how data is translated from input to output using various methodologies and stuff like that. That's computational thinking. And it doesn't require a computer, but it's essential that you teach this from a young age on. And I was surprised. I had kids between, I think the youngest were 5 or 6. You'd be surprised at the complexity of things that you can teach them, ranging up to starting in AI, without any programming, and still have them understand. Of course, you need to turn this around into a game and that sort of stuff. But I think it's time that we update the curriculum of informatics in our schools. And I'm not blaming anyone or pointing fingers, but I think it's outdated compared to what's happening around us.
Very interesting. Yeah. Do you think that? I mean, now we focus on the young generation, right, to kind of start at the very beginning. But do you think that also maybe elderly people should be retrained or skilled, or is that kind of a lost generation, if you want to say so?
That's I don't want to go on camera saying it's a lost generation. No, I mean, I've taught programming to a lot of people, going from as a Coder Dojo to very young people to teenagers as an academic. And trying to explain what I do to my family. And I think that trying to explain AI in its very broad sense to everyone, it doesn't seem feasible to me. I think it's probably more interesting to explain what it's not and what it can't do than trying to explain how it works and trying to give the broader picture starting from scratch every time that a presentation about AI is given. Yeah.
Definitely. I think there's a lot of myth also around the term AI itself, right? Also, yeah, definitely in society overall. Yeah, thank you. Okay, Michelle, what do you think? Is there any way that companies should be completely in charge of reskilling their employees, or should it be given to schools, or do you think that there should be the approach that we have is actually quite good? Maybe that's also fine.
I think, as I mentioned, skills and knowledge, data literacy are very important at different levels. And I think I agree with the speakers that when we think about even education in high school, there should be more attention in basic data literacy skills. It's not only about programming. My son learns to teach how to program in Python. It's also about some of the ethical dimensions, some of the privacy issues. So I think there's room to have broad education there as well, up to, let's say, higher education and university, where there could be more courses related to the use of AI analytics in certain domains. Think about people who are following law school, for example. What is the role of AI in a justice department? We see that adoption there is very difficult. So if we can put these in the curricula, law schools, but think about engineer, for example, teach them the basic principles of Industry 4.0, how to use sensor data to increase output of production processes, or check on the maintenance of machines. So I want to plead for also in this sense specific courses which are relevant in certain domains. And then I think finally, in terms of companies or government agencies, I think what we've seen is that in general, companies that apply these techniques are more successful than others. So if they use data analytics, they're more successful than their peers in reaching their KPIs, in reaching growth, profitability. So anyone should be conscious that investing in education in people will have a return, will have a return on investment. So in this sense, in terms of financing, I think it can be included in also in government agency plans, that if they want to reach their KPIs, their efficiency, that investing in digital, but also in the education of people is very important. And the final thing is that education at the government agency level, or even at the company level, should be diversified. You bring different messages or different types of courses depending on the type of profile. You have C-level people in government, you have middle and senior managers, but then you also have operational staff that is confronted with AI. For each of these profiles, there should be kind of a diversified set of courses. When we think about operational people, it is more about teaching them in a very simple way how, in the context of their process, AI can support them. Whereas at the higher level, the management level, it is also about how do I organize a company? How do I create an analytics vision? So yeah, we see a lot of room for education there.
Yeah. Thank you for this view. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I think quite on time. We are done with the webcast. Thank you everyone first for attending, and special thanks obviously to our three speakers, and Florian Myter, as well as of course also for Desiree Timmermans and for Xavier for hosting us. It was my pleasure. And just to let you know, the free webcast, the next one is on January 26th in 2021. And we start the year with the topic Data and AI for Good. And obviously, we wish you now nice festivities and a great start into the new year. And obviously, stay healthy, everyone. See you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.